somehow, while I wasn't looking, July started, and I'm confused and mildly concerned, but it is what it is. Time does exist, and marches inexorably on, unfortunately, as I have noticed. But on the plus side, a silver lining is that because we're halfway through the year, I can participate for literally the first time ever in the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag, which is a time-honored tradition on BookTube. And I have enjoyed watching this tag, as done by many of my favorite bookish creators for many years, but for whatever reason, I have never endeavored to do it myself. And this year, it finally occurred to me that I in fact am on BookTube. And I could make one, not just watch them. So here I am. I'm doing the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. If you've never seen one of these tags, it's just a series of questions. And the idea is just to check in halfway through the year, share books you've loved or that surprised you, characters that have really stayed with you, and so on, just as a bit of a check-in to see how we're all doing halfway through the year. If you don't make YouTube videos, but you want to answer these questions, feel free in the comments down below. I'll put the questions in the description box. You can copy and paste. I would love to read your answers. And I will link the creator who I believe originated this tag many years ago in the description box if you want to go check out the first ever Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. Also, of course, many of the books that I'm going to talk about in this video, I have longer reviews of or reading vlogs of on my channel. So anytime I'm talking about a book that I have a reading vlog for that you can go watch for a much more detailed review, much more content about that specific book to hear all my thoughts and feelings, I will put this symbol and sound effect on the screen. And if you check out the description box, I'll have the links to all those videos so you can watch them after this if you so choose. Also, for every book I talk about, I will share my book card with a little bit of info, including the content warnings that I noticed while reading, representation notes, things of that nature, in case that information is helpful to you. And this sound will play when the book card pops up on the screen. So if you are listening to this more like a podcast, that is when you would want to come back to the video if you want that information. I do also have a database for all of that information, but I do believe I'm a little behind on updating it. I will have it linked in the description box anyway, in case that is more accessible for you, but bear with me if I'm a couple books behind. I'm working on it. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with question 1, which is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And I had a lot of candidates, a lot of options. I did manage to slot all of the other options into other categories in this video, so I could still talk about them. And that left me with a single book that is taking the crown, and that is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. I read this a few weeks ago, and it is just still on my mind 24/7, all the time. This is historical fiction. It's set in the Netherlands in the 60s, and it's following World War II and dealing with the aftermath of World War II in a very intimate and raw and vulnerable way. And it's not your typical World War II historical fiction, either during or in the immediate aftermath, where everyone is always talking about it and the war is really ever present on every page. It is, but it isn't. It is ever present in the scars that it has left on the people who lived through it. And our protagonist and the other main characters in the book were children during World War II. So it impacted them on a fundamental level as they were growing up, as they were coming of age. And it has impacted them in ways that they sometimes don't even recognize themselves because they don't know any other life. This book is so much about grief and loss and memory, inheritance and ownership, stewardship, but it's also about desire and passion and coming into your own, coming of age, finally understanding yourself and what you want. It's also sapphic, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It's so beautifully written. It's so atmospheric and tense and heavy, and yet still has some levity and love and hope to it in moments. Oh God, I could talk about this forever. I could talk about it forever. It made me flustered. It made me giddy at times. It made me sob. It was gorgeous. It taught me about a time period in the Netherlands and a specific experience in the Netherlands that I had never learned about. And I will never forget these characters, ever, I don't think. I can't imagine how. 5 stars with my whole heart. Go check out the reading vlog for so many more thoughts, detailed thoughts, spoiler sections if you want those, easily skippable if you don't. But wow, stunning. It is very obvious to me why this won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2025. And it's the best book I've read so far this year. Hands down. The next question is, what is the best sequel you have read so far? And I have not read a lot of sequels this year. I've not really continued in many series. I do own the next book in a few series that I have not read yet and that I should read. But I honestly was racking my brain for this, and I ended up choosing a prequel, so I hope that's okay. This year I read the 2 Hunger Games prequels, and then I reread the original trilogy for the first time since I read them as a teenager when they were first coming out. And here's catching fire so that I can hold something up for the video. But I would say out of all of the continuations, all the books in the series other than the very first book, The Hunger Games, this might be a controversial take. You let me know if it is, I guess. But I think my favorite is Sunrise on the Reaping, the second prequel, the most recent release. I just thought it was incredible. It really touched me emotionally. The character work was so impeccable. And I mean, Suzanne Collins is great at character work. Clearly, her characters are really the heart of this series, and they are the reason why people are so invested in this series and have been for so long, and people get very passionate and worked up about the characters. Ask me how I know. I just was so drawn into this one. And again, all the other books are great. Ironically, the only Catching Fire, which is the one I grabbed off my shelf, is the only book in the entire series that I didn't give 5 stars to. I gave this one 4 stars. But Sunrise on the Reaping just hit me in a completely different way. It had me sobbing multiple times. I just thought it was gorgeous. I thought the character work was great. I thought the way that it told Haymitch's story was so engrossing, and it brought back all of the magic of the first Hunger Games book for me, and it was the impetus for me to reread the original trilogy. I felt like the pacing was perfect, the structure was great, the writing was good as it always is, the themes, the world building. But Haymitch specifically, and some of the other major characters that are in this book, just captured my heart so strongly, and I loved it. I had a great time reading it. It's not a sequel, but it is part of a series, and it is the best that I read this year. Again, probably a controversial take. I know some people hate the prequels. You are free to have your opinion. That's okay. Reasonable minds can disagree. Question 3 is what new release you haven't read yet but want to? And I have many. I have many new releases that I would love to read. I don't really stay on top of new releases, to be honest. I told myself I would be better about it this year, and then I really wasn't. I did not stay on top of it. But I have heard about some new releases, and there are some that I've been sort of keeping my eye on that I'm very interested in picking up. The first one is Kin by Tayari Jones. This one's literary fiction, and the premise here is that 2 girls have lost their mothers and they become inseparable friends. And then in adulthood, their lives diverge. And the book is said to be exploring themes like family, race, class, identity, and the complicated bonds that connect generations of women. And it takes place in rural Louisiana. And I've heard so much buzz about this book. I've seen a lot of people reading it. I've seen it being speculated to be nominated for a bunch of literary awards. It just sounds very interesting to me. And I feel like I've been on a bit of a kick lately reading books about sisters or siblings and characters who feel like siblings, even if they aren't biological siblings. And this has just really been on my radar. So I hope that I can read it sometime before the end of the year. Another one that I don't own a copy of, but I keep hearing about and I'm very curious about is a gothic horror, and I believe specifically a queer gothic horror story, Hemlock by Melissa Falaveno. And this is about a protagonist who disappears to her family cabin in the woods that is isolated, and it's the place where her mother went missing many years ago. And the protagonist is struggling with addiction. She's trying to get a new start, and the forest is becoming more and more unsettling. And the blurb really leaves it open whether this is going to be, a hallucination, it's all in your mind sort of story, or if there is something genuinely sinister in the woods. And I love horror. I love a gothic horror. I love a spooky horror. I love a horror in the woods. I love horror that is hinging on the terror of nature. So I'm into it. I'm excited about it. I keep hearing about this one and hearing buzz about this one as well, so it has been on my list. And the third and final book I'll bring up for this before I move on is probably unsurprising to those of you who have been watching me for a while. Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. I do have a copy. I got it from Aardvark, and it's signed. I read and loved Bat Eater and Other Names for Korzang by Kylie Lee Baker in 2025, and I just loved it so much. It was one of my favorite books of the year. It's impeccable. It's incredible. Go read it if you haven't. And as soon as I heard that Kylie Lee Baker was putting out another horror novel, I jumped. Kylie Lee Baker said jump, and I said how high. I bought it as soon as I saw it. I put it in my cart immediately. Anyway, You get it. I'm excited about it. But I think what's most intriguing about this one is that it seems to have maybe some similar supernatural elements as Baker's previous work, and also have a bit more of a gothic element that her first book didn't really have, but also that it has two timelines. So there are two protagonists in two different times, both living in the same house. Something is going on. They're sort of crossing the veil. Are they both haunting each other? Is it a time travel sort of thing? Is there a portal or something else going on? I don't know because I haven't read it yet, but I am so excited. It sounds so interesting. In this lyrical, wildly inventive horror novel interwoven with Japanese mythology, two people living centuries apart discover a door between their worlds. It sounds amazing. I loved Bad Eater and Other Names for Courtesang, so this one is one that I want to get to very soon. I was originally trying very hard to have willpower and to wait until the spooky season, but I might have to just give up and read it immediately, because the more I talk about it, the more I want to read it right now. So then question 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Again, I haven't been super on top of following new releases, but I have come across a few. One is the continuation of a series that I have, well, had mixed experiences with, but I'm very curious to see what happens next. And one is a standalone, but the premise is just so wild that I have to read it. I came across it in a live stream I did recently with my patrons and channel members, where I was going through some upcoming releases and some new releases from the first half of the year. And I had seen this cover a couple times, but I hadn't actually read the blurb, and I read the premise and immediately added it to my TBR because it's just so weird. And that is Agnes Lives by Hallie Elizabeth Newton. And this is literary horror. It's about a fading socialite on the hunt for someone to kill her before her next Soul Cycle class. And honestly, reading that description takes me on a roller coaster. I normally am not super into reading books about famous people or about the uber wealthy. It just doesn't really do anything for me. But I'm kind of intrigued by the dichotomy there, and that she has a life of luxury. She has everything she could ever want. Designer handbags. She lives in a gleaming tower in New York City, but she is feeling so much existential dread that she is trying to find someone to end it all. And the more that I read the blurb, the more I want to read it. Agnes Lives is an extraordinary debut novel from one of the most exciting new writers at work today, detailing everything chic, everything sexy, and everything terrifyingly, crushingly depraved about a culture totally hung up on image. And I eat it up. I do, as much as I'm not super into books about wealthy, famous people, I do love a horror book that is dismantling, especially gendered expectations of grooming, fashion, presentation, body image, etc. Some of my favorite, more literary horror novels of the last couple years, I think of Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang on my shelves back here. A great example, Rouge by Mona Awad. Probably more I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head, many that are on my TBR that are using horror as a way to dismantle and examine these ideas. And I love that. And this premise is wild and fun. So I'm looking forward to it. The other one, like I said, is part of a series that I have been reading. It is part of, I don't actually know what the series itself is called, but it is the series that started with Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and then Hellbent is the second book. And I had a couple qualms with Ninth House. It wasn't an absolutely perfect book for me. I had some issues with it, but I generally really enjoyed it. It's fantasy, pretty dark. Definitely dark academia, but heavy on the dark. And I had fun with the first book. The second book, for me, was a bit of a dud, not gonna lie. I was pretty disappointed with it, but I'm still invested in the world and I'm interested in where this is going to go. I feel like Leigh Bardugo is great at concepts and the premise of her novels, and then I'm not always super into the execution, but I'm hoping she can stick the landing, which is why I am very much anticipating the third book in the series, and I believe final. Future me will check that for you. Pretty sure it's the final. Deadbeat by Leigh Bardugo. The third Alex Stern novel, returning to Yale's secret societies and the world of occult magic, set to be another supernatural mystery steeped in dark academia vibes. And I'm hopeful that it will be even better than the first book. You know, why not? One can hope. I'm interested. I'm going to read it anyway. That is the short and tall of it. The short and long of it. I don't know what that saying is. Anyway, I'm going to read it either way because I'm curious. I'm a little scared, but I'm interested. If any of you have read an arc, let me know. Let me know if it's good. I hope so. Okay, the fifth question makes me sad because it's the biggest disappointment. I have two, and they disappointed me in different ways. So let me talk about them. The first one is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I've talked about this book at length now and I've explained a few times why I was disappointed by it. But basically, to summarize, this book had so much potential. It did so many things so well. I loved so many things about it. And yet I was never allowed a moment of peace because the book has to abuse women constantly and explicitly on the page. Why did it have to do that? I don't know. Couldn't tell you. Realism, I guess. But we don't have to get into the realism of so many other aspects of living in the Middle Ages, but we do have to experience constant violent misogyny. Listen, this book has so much to give. I enjoyed so many parts of it. I wish I could have just raved about it, but good Lord, reading this as a woman is not fun. It's not fun. Check out my longer review for more context if you really want the details, especially if you haven't read this and you want to know more specifically what I have issues with, because I do have a pretty in-depth non-spoiler section in my review of this in the reading vlog it's included in, because I wanted to kind of warn people who haven't read it yet. And it sucks because it had so much potential. And again, there's so much about this that I love. The cathedral building, incredible. Loved it so much. Alas, the book itself makes me mad. So that's The Pillars of the Earth. And my other biggest disappointment makes me very sad because it's part of a series that I love. And I really loved the first two books in the series and gave both of them 5 stars. And this one was just such a letdown for me. It's Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. What in the world is happening here? Not only is this book not nearly as cozy as the first two, and the whole idea is that it's a cozy fantasy series. And Travis Baldree even says in the author's note that he worried that people wouldn't want to read an installment in a cozy fantasy series that was less cozy than the other books. And I'm thinking, yeah. Kinda, yeah. I mean, this book can exist. It's not like it's ridiculously dark, but it just was not, it wasn't the tone I had come to expect from the series. And also, I just feel like this should have been about a different character. The fact that it was about Fern, who is a main character, not our main character, but a prominent secondary character in the second book in the series, or the first prequel, or the only prequel, I guess, didn't make sense to me because Fern felt like a completely different character in this book. And in some ways, it's supposed to be a bit of a midlife crisis. So I get that she is going through it and acting different. I just feel like it could have been a different character, and that would have solved a lot of my issues with it. I was very upset with the ways that Fern was acting. I thought she was being very uncool. What in the world kind of person is she, or ratkin is she, to treat her sweet baby pot roast like that? I will never forgive her. And also the book itself was pretty boring and repetitive, and there were a lot of fight scenes and chases and things that I did not care about. I don't know. This was a big disappointment. I struggled through it. I tried to start it several times and could not get into it. And then I finally forced myself and I didn't have fun at all. And I'm sad about it. Pot roast deserved so much better in world, and Fern deserved better outworld, outside of the world, from Travis Baldree, because the character assassination is wild. Anyways, if you've read this series, please let me know how you felt about this one, because I am sad about it. Will I read the next one if Travis Baldree puts out another one? Yeah, I will. I might have lower expectations though. Anyways. Enough of that. Next question, number 6, is biggest surprise. And I have a couple options for this. 2 are from my Reading Around the World challenge. I feel like a lot of books that I read for my Reading Around the World challenge end up being big surprises because many of them are books I've literally never heard of until I do research for a book from a specific country. And then I read them, and so many of them are so good, just incredible books that I love. So I'm being surprised in a lovely, pleasant way over and over and over again. But I would say two recent reads from my Reading Around the World challenge really stood out to me as very good surprises. The first is Eve de ses décombres, or Eve Out of Her Ruins, I think, in the English translation, by Ananda Devi from Mauritius. So good. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. Beautifully written. Amazing character work. Heartbreaking. Gorgeous. 5 million stars out of 5. Wow. And then from that same reading vlog, I read a book from Guyana. I don't know where my e-reader is right now. I'm surrounded by piles of books. It is in one of these piles, but it's Palace of the Peacock by Sir Wilson Harris. And this one is just a fever dream. It is so odd. It has very unusual structure. It is very flowing and lyrical and dreamlike and hazy. You feel like you're hallucinating. It is gorgeous and damp and explores a variety of themes, especially colonization and its impact on the natural environment, and then also kind of nature fighting back. It is beautiful. Beautiful. So check out the reading vlog linked below for full-length reviews of both of these because wow, Both were huge surprises for me. Another one I would list is Wizard of the Crow by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. This was a buddy read pick for my buddy read over on Patreon, and this author is from Kenya, and this is a satirical novel and quite long, but very funny, very sharp in its commentary, very biting in its commentary, and just so engaging and fun. The characters really jumped off the page. I was invested all the way through, despite how long it was and complicated it was. It is strange and weird and fascinating, and I just had so much fun with it. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and when I finished it, I immediately went out and bought several more of Ngugi wa Thiong'o's books, because I needed to read more of his writing. What a fascinating man. And his brain kind of blows my mind. So would recommend Wizard of the Crow. And then the final one I'm going to mention briefly is a recent read, The Girl with a Thousand Faces by Sun Yi Dean. I read this recently for my Aardvark reading vlog for Pride Month. Check that out if you missed it. And this one is fantasy, horror, set in China, in an alternate China with supernatural forces. And it's also dealing with World War II and the aftermath and grief and loss. And it's personifying the loss in ghosts. And so much about this book surprised me. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't think it was absolutely perfect, but one thing it did do was surprise me at almost every turn. It is such an unusual book. It's such a unique book. And it's not only that it's drawing on Chinese mythology and the ways that it does that, but in the way that it structures the story and the way that it tells the story, its use of second person, its use of alternating timelines or, multiple timelines, multiple narratives, use of multiple point of view characters, and the way it handles its themes. Just so fascinating and so unique. And it's one of those books where I did have a few issues with it. And there are a few things that I pointed out in my reading vlog and talked about, at length that were reasons why I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars. But it's one of those books that I think might stick with me for a long time. And I might end up bumping my rating up to 5 just because it did so many interesting things. And it really felt like it was a book that was not trying to follow conventions. And I love that. So surprising. Would recommend. Okay, next up, question 7 is favorite new author, either a debut author or a new author to you. And I have a few options, 3 to be precise. So the first one I'll mention, I read back at the beginning of the year, The Names by Florence Knapp. I read it as an ebook borrowed from the library, so I don't have it anymore. But I read this for my Goodreads Choice Awards video that I do every year. And this was a runner-up, the runner-up in the debut category. And I'm so glad I read it because it's a gorgeous book about nominative determinism and the ways, specifically the ways that our names can shape our lives. And it follows a woman who has just had her second child and she is choosing her son's name. And the narrative follows 3 versions of reality where she names her son 3 different options, either the name that her husband wants, which is his own name being passed down, the name that she wants, that she would choose for her son, and the name that her daughter would choose for her own brother. And we follow this boy's life through to adulthood and see the different ways that his life plays out and that the lives of his family around him play out based on the name that was chosen. And it's just heartbreaking and beautiful. It is very sad and hard to read at times, but it was so beautifully written. The characterization was incredible. It made me cry over and over again. And as someone who is super into nominative determinism, I found the concept, the premise absolutely fascinating and loved that aspect of it. So I was very excited to read this, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Florence Knapp writes next. Then my 2 other picks for this are not debut authors, but they are new to me. This is the first time that I've read from them. The first one is Chu Miaojin, and the book is Notes of a Crocodile. I read this for my Reading Around the World challenge, and this was my pick for Taiwan. This is a queer Taiwanese classic, a lesbian classic in Taiwan. It is strange and surreal and heartbreaking and beautiful and hopeful. It is very much a coming of age story, and it has so much specificity to Taiwan and to Taipei more specifically, but it also has a universality to it. Growing up as a queer person and being, especially in college at that specific age, sort of on the cusp of your proper adulthood and finding yourself and finding your found family and figuring out how you can have these relationships and how you fit together with other people and how to accept yourself, especially when you feel like a spectacle on the world stage, especially in this time period in the 80s in Taiwan for queer people and the ways they were being talked about in the media, on the news. And it just has so many layers, and it also has a very endearing talking crocodile who wears a human suit when it goes out and about, which is a very fun and apt metaphor. Beautiful, loved it, incredible. Sadly, she is no longer with us, but I will be working my way through all of her work that is in existence because this was just tender and heartbreaking and beautiful, and I adored it. So, and the last one for this question before I move on, I read for my Read It or Unhaul It challenge, specifically for my 7 books in 7 days Read It or Unhaul It sprint that I did. I think this was for day 2, maybe. Erica Swyler, and the book of hers I read was We Lived on the Horizon. And this is science fiction. Ugh, this made me so emotional. This is gorgeous. This also has a lesbian protagonist and her relationship sort of coming back to her ex-partner, essentially, and them finding each other again. I mean, they never fully left, but properly begrudgingly accepting that they are in love and always will be and are going to spend the rest of their lives together. But it's also a book that is unexpectedly about medical debt and inequality in access to medical care. It is a book about classism and wealth inequality, wealth disparity. It is a book about individuality versus community and how do we exist in a community? How do we give to others? How do we contribute without giving everything and having nothing left? Where is that balance? Where is the line? How can we exist in community without losing ourselves? And also, what does it mean to be a person? Beautiful, gorgeous, funny, heartfelt, made me cry, so endearing, had me giggling and kicking my feet, had me feeling all the feelings. I will definitely be reading everything else that Erica Swyler writes. Yes. Question 8 is your newest fictional crush. Now, I don't really get fictional crushes. I guess that's a thing, right? That's a thing that people do. I don't self-insert when I read books, and I also don't tend to get crushes on fictional characters. So I didn't really know how to answer this. What I decided to do instead is tell you what character I would most want to be friends with if I lived in the world of the book, and that is Alderic from Kill the Beast by Sarah Swift. I recently read this also for my Aardvark Pride reading vlog, and this one also surprised me. I really enjoyed this book, and one of my favorite things about it was the development of the friendship between Lysa and Alderic. And as I was reading, I mean, I would also be friends with Lysa, but Alderic is my kind of guy. I loved him. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was great. He was so sweet. He loved what he loved, including ruffles and frills and tight pants, and good for him. He also loved to knit and crochet, and I love that for him. I would want to be his friend. So that is my answer to this question. Because I don't get crushes on fictional characters. All right, moving on to question 9, which is your new favorite character. And Alderic would probably fit in this category, but I've already talked about him. I would also say the protagonist of We Lived on the Horizon, Enita, bioprosthetic surgeon, aging lesbian, lovely lady. Love Enita. Also, if I were to pick another, I would say Una from The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. Love this book so much. It's fantasy with a heavy romance component, probably romantic fantasy. Some people might say romantasy. Beautiful, lovely, heartbreaking, gorgeous. Loved it so much. Made me cry a lot. And I really, really loved Una as a character. And I, again, would love to be her friend. Would love to know her. What an amazing person. And she also made me feel seen in ways. I would say, there are a lot of things about us that are not similar, but as a fellow very tall bisexual lady, I felt seen by aspects of her, and I loved that for me, and I guess for her too, for everyone in the world. More tall, strong, both physically and emotionally bisexual female protagonists in books. Please and thank you. Loved Una. Then, question number 9 is a funny one, if you know me. It is books that made you cry. And to be totally honest, almost every book that I give 5 stars to will have made me cry at some point. That's just who I am as a person. Almost every book I've mentioned already made me cry, so keep that in mind. But I decided to pick the few that probably made me cry the hardest, sort of uncontrollable sobbing at some point while reading for this prompt, since I feel like the bar has to be raised because I cry pretty easily. And I have 2. The first one is Severance by Ling Ma. I read this for my Read It or Unhaul It challenge. It is a zombie apocalypse story, but that does not describe what it is at all. It is a story about the immigrant experience. It is a story about family. It is a story about work-life balance and capitalism and memory and nostalgia and getting trapped in a loop and not really living your life, disconnecting from your life. I loved Candace, our protagonist, and there was a specific scene in this that made me break down and sob so hard that I stopped breathing. 5 stars. Gorgeous, beautiful, so much about grief as well. Needed it, loved it. Also for my Read It or Unhaul It challenge, but this was another one in my sprint, my 7 books in 7 days, Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. This is billed as a horror novel, and as I've said every time I've brought this book up and reviewed it, I don't think selling it as a horror novel does it justice, because it does have horror elements. It does have a few scary elements, some maybe possibly supernatural, who knows, elements. And I can understand why people who never read horror might find those parts horrific. However, this to me read like contemporary fiction, focused on grief. And again, you might be unsurprised to find out that another book that is exploring grief broke my heart into a million pieces. Our protagonist has lost her grandmother relatively recently, I think the past year, and then her sister has passed. And she's going home for the first time since her sister passed. And she still hasn't fully reckoned with the loss of her grandmother, but she definitely hasn't processed the grief for her sister. And it's about family and belonging and coming home and grief and loss and love and letting go, but also holding on. And that sounds so, I don't know, that sounded so dramatic and cliche, but this book was gorgeous. It made me sob multiple times. And I recommended it to my mom, who I don't think has ever read a horror novel, to read for her own grief. I've recommended this to so many people. I think it's beautiful. I'm so glad I read it. It made me feel at home. It takes place, so much of this book takes place in Alberta, which is where I live. And it's just beautiful. I love Mackenzie. I love her family. I'm gonna cry just talking about it. See? Oh my God. Number 11 is books that made you happy. I feel like I've talked about a few books already that would count under this category, but I'm trying to give you variety. So I picked 2 other books. The first one was a book club pick for my book club over on Patreon, The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. Very short, very poetic and lyrical, very interesting in the way it's written, interesting premise, engaging folklore, fairy tale feel to it, incorporates music in a really lovely way. The audiobook has actual singing of the music, which was wonderful and really added to the experience. The physical copy has illustrations. This was a whole sensory experience, and it made me feel a lot of things. Definitely not just happiness. Don't think that this is just a happy-go-lucky, easy read. There are some hard topics, some difficult subject matter, and I wasn't always happy reading it, but my predominant feeling upon finishing it was happiness in relation to the characters in the story, but also just gratitude and happiness that I read it. So, The River Has Roots. And then the other one I would pick for this is The Night Eaters by Marjorie Liu and illustrated by Sana Takeda. This is the first book of She Eats the Night. I think The Night Eaters is the name of the whole series of graphic novels, and She Eats the Night is book 1, or vice versa. I'm new to graphic novels, okay? I'm still figuring it out, but I love Monstrous by the same pair, another graphic novel series, and I picked this up for my Read It or Unhaul It challenge and adored it. Funny, heartwarming, made me smile, made me laugh. Also, it is also horror, scary at times, some creepy imagery, but also just overall made me happy. I don't know what to tell you. It was very endearing and I loved it. And I'm going to continue reading the graphic novel series. So that is my second pick for books that made me happy. Then question number 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received. And honestly, pat myself on the back, because I was trying to do a bit of a minor book ban, a soft book buying ban this year, and I've stuck to it pretty well. So I haven't really bought any fancy special editions or anything this year. I haven't really bought any books that are particularly gorgeous. I haven't bought a huge number of books in general, which I'm proud of myself for. So what I thought I would do is highlight the prettiest book that I read this year. I technically didn't buy this copy of the book this year, but I did reread this book with my book club this year. And then the second one is a book that my husband bought for me for Christmas. So technically not in 2026, but shortly before 2026. And I don't think I've ever shown it to you. So the prettiest book that I read this year and that I did buy myself was this version of The Hobbit. This is the illustrated edition, illustrated by the author. It has a bunch of the author's paintings and drawings and sketches. The book itself is obviously beautiful, but I loved getting to see illustrations as I read, sketches and things really added to the experience. And the book itself is quite beautiful, even under the dust jacket. It's really gorgeous. And I bought this version because I wanted to reread The Hobbit, and the version I own is also actually gorgeous. It's up here on my shelf, but it was actually my mother's from her childhood. I will probably never actually read that one because I'm too scared to ruin it. Because I'm clumsy. And then the book that my husband bought me for Christmas is a Folio Society edition. I love folio editions of one of my favorite books, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Look at it in a box. Of course, it has a cutout, and the book itself I mean, look at this gorgeous piece of art. I just, if Folio Society editions were not ridiculously expensive, even without the exchange rate to Canadian dollars, I would fill my entire library with their editions. But it's illustrated and the illustrations are just stunning. I cannot wait to reread the book. I'm a little afraid to read it in this edition because I'm worried I'll ruin it somehow, but I would love to read it and see the illustrations as I go through it. Just ridiculously stunning. My husband knows me very well. So again, technically this is from 2025, but I don't think I've actually shown it to any of you or shown it on my channel. I have it in the background of my videos on the shelf, but it's not the same. So pure Nessie. Then for fun, I decided to add a bonus question. This is not part of the regular tag, but I wanted to share some of the books I've read this year that have the coolest covers, not the prettiest or fanciest editions, but just have really cool cover design. Maybe that counts as the same category, but either way, I'm going to quickly show them to you. I have 4 picks for this, and although I really enjoyed all 4 of these and would recommend, I'm not actually going to review them or talk about them in this video because I feel like I've been talking for ages already, and because this is more about the cover design, but I will link videos where you can watch reviews or reading vlogs of all of these if you want my thoughts. But these are the books that I would say have the coolest covers of the books I've read so far this year. Calocane by Karen Boya. Enough said. Catalina by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. Again, need I say more? Whoever You Are Honey by Olivia Gatwood. I mean, look at it. And last but not least, Spoiled Milk by Avery Curran. Again, need I say more? What a cover. So that was my 12.5. Okay, then question 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? And the answer is so many, it's embarrassing. So many. Literally, this entire bookshelf is full of books I haven't read yet. I need to read all of them. I also have a pile of books next to me for reading vlogs that I would like to do that are sitting there staring at me, burning a hole in the back of my head, making me feel bad. So many books. I have so many books on my TBR. It's ridiculous. I don't want to start listing them because I literally will go on forever, but I'll put some covers on the screen. Here are some of the books that I really hope to get to before the end of the year. This is not a guaranteed promised TBR because my mood reading brain will not allow me to do that, but these are just a few of the many books that I would like to read before the end of the year. And I probably won't get to most of them because that's how it goes every time. And that brings us to the final question. Favorite book community member. I don't really want to single anyone out, but I do watch a lot of amazing creators on the bookish internet, and they're great and lovely and make awesome content. So I will share a bunch of links to other creators whose content I enjoy in the description box if you want to find more creators and want to check them out. Would recommend. They're smart, funny, nice people, and they talk about books. What more could you want? So that is it. That is the mid-year book freakout tag. That was all the books I wanted to talk about. I talked for way longer than I thought I would. So I hope you enjoyed this. Give this video a like if you did and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know if I should do this again or if we should just pretend this never happened. I will hang my head in shame and never speak of it again. Those are apparently the only 2 options. If any of these questions tickle your fancy, leave your answers in the comments down below. I would love to read them and chat more about books with you. If you want longer reviews of any of the books mentioned in this video, check out the description box. I will have reading vlogs and reviews and wrap-ups linked for you so you can check those out. And leave an emoji representing one of the books I talked about in this video down below in the comments, and I will try to guess which book your emoji represents. I might regret this in the future. I have had some people drop emojis that were tangentially connected at best, but it's a fun game. So leave your emoji down below. Thank you for watching this whole video. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.